50 potential jurors were questioned one by one on the witness stand today, directly across from where Eric Koula and his family were seated.
Jurors don't like to be singled out, so they're not going to volunteer that they have knowledge of it or that they formed an opinion. So you really have to be able to ask open-ended questions to make them feel comfortable.
The first question I would ask is, have you formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this particular individual? Can you set aside what you've heard in the media, seen on TV, read in the newspapers, spoken with coworkers by the water cooler about? Can you lay all that aside and judge the case on the facts that you have seen and heard, not outside of the courtroom, but only those within the courtroom?
The Koula defense team and the state found 15 jurors they believe can do so. That's the standard 12 plus 3 alternates, all to hear a case expected to run for 4 weeks.
It is emotionally taxing. You got a really highly charged situation. It is hard for anybody to concentrate that long.
A long case, obviously does, bring some concerns, not the least of which is the ability of jurors to pay attention to all the evidence that you're bringing in, because every little bit of evidence may be cumulative as to the guilt or the innocence of the accused.
The jury will hear opening statements tomorrow morning, and jurors will then do a walkthrough of the crime scene in the afternoon. Then begins the hearing of testimony with some 86 witnesses, including Koula himself, scheduled to take the stand. Eric Koula's attorneys say his relationship with his father Dennis was one enviable to families everywhere. When Eric was little, his dad used to see him and say, "How you doing, kiddo?" And that catchphrase stayed with the two until Eric found his father shot in the head on the morning of May 24th.
My dad is in the kitchen. Your dad is in the kitchen? Where's your mom? My mom is in the computer. Okay. In the room. Is your mom breathing? No. Okay, and your dad is not breathing? No.
During opening statements today, the DA called Eric Koula a man of secrets, saying he was facing $50,000 in credit card debts in May of 2010, and that he blew through more than $150,000 combined in 2 bank accounts in just 2 years. That's what the state says led him to shoot his parents and later write himself a $50,000 check from his father's account.
Police are suspicious because he had never mentioned anything about this check. It's dated the day of the parent's death, and it's for a large amount of money. Jane Lewis will testify from the Milwaukee Crime Lab. She's a handwriting examiner, and she will tell you that it was identified that this writing is Eric Koula's. This signature is not Dennis Koula's natural signature.
But the defense says Eric was authorized by his parents to sign that check, and his lawyers say the prosecution's alleged motive of money is non-existent, claiming Koula was up to date with paying all his bills the month of the murders. And his attorneys also say it's physically impossible that he shot his mother. The state alleges she died at 5:41 p.m., seated at her computer, but the Koula defense team says one of Eric's friends will testify that the former left the latter's house in La Crosse at 5:30 that day, meaning he would have just 11 minutes to make it to the crime scene in Berry Mills.
There's no physical evidence, there's no motive, and there's no opportunity. And I think, folks, once you have the whole story, you're going to conclude not only, number one, because of the love, Eric could not do this, but number two, it was impossible for him to do it.
The state alleges that Koula's motive was collecting an inheritance to solve financial problems. News 19's Pete Zervakis has been following this story for us, and he has more on what happened in the courtroom today.
Because they're trying right now as we talk. And I'm certain, based on what you told me about your mom then, that they would want you to do the right thing.
July 29th, 2010. Eric Koula spends some 3 hours in this room being interviewed by state agent John Christopherson. The latter was trying to elicit some type of admissions from Koula about the homicides of his parents, Dennis and Merna. Shortly after this interview ended, Eric was arrested for their deaths.
It would be fair to say that there's nothing that Eric was going to say on that particular day that was going to avoid him being arrested. True?
No. That isn't true.
That isn't true. So if he had given you some answers that were convincing enough, you would not have been arrested that day?
Correct.
Christofferson says he tried to appeal to Koula's emotions on July 29th, convincing him it'd be best to just come clean. He also testified today that he exaggerated to Koula the amount of evidence the state had against him. He said police could use cell phone signals to prove Koula was really at his parents' house when he claimed to be at the Shopko on La Crosse's north side the night of the killings. That wasn't true, and Christofferson used a similar tactic when it came to DNA.
You knew at that time that there was no match of DNA between Eric and the crime scene, correct?
That is correct.
You would agree with me that in the way you talked to Mr. Koula about DNA in this interrogation, it suggested that you did have that evidence, correct?
No, I would say that I was trying to suggest that DNA could be left behind at the crime scene.
But as the defense points out, Koula time and time again tells Christofferson he did not kill his parents. He also neglects to point the finger at anyone else when asked to think of possible suspects, something his defense team hopes will convince the jury he's an innocent man.
We also heard from a second investigator on the case today who says he made the drive from Loomis Street to the Koula household near Fox Hollow. He testified it took him just under 15 minutes. Nigel Adcock, who lives straight west of the crime scene, and that made him Dennis and Merna's closest neighbor in that direction.
Urgent, we intend to levy on certain assets. Please respond now.
In January of 2010, Eric Koula and his wife owed some $40,000 to the IRS, which led to letter after letter threatening them of a tax levy.
Call immediately to prevent property loss.
The state argues this was a microcosm of Koula's financial status in the years leading up to the homicides of his parents. The district attorney paid accountant Mary Jo Werner to review Koula's finances. She testified during the last 2 days that he took out loans and cash advances at astronomical interest rates, like a $3,000 auto title loan at 150%.
How much did that $3,000 cost the defendant to get?
He paid $970.60 for the loan for 3 months.
But the defense called its own financial witness today in the form of accountant Deborah Thompson.
Were all of Eric's credit cards paid and current as of May 21st, 2010?
Yes.
Were Eric's mortgage payments paid and current as of May 21st, 2010?
Yes.
Thompson testified Koula had just $4,000 in cash as of mid-May 2010, although she said that would have been enough to cover all his monthly expenses for June. But as the district attorney pointed out after that, Koula would have needed either more loans or a job. Two pivotal pieces of evidence. One, a $50,000 check made out to Eric Koula and seemingly signed by his father Dennis. The other, a note found in Koula's mailbox the same week he found Dennis and his mom Merna dead in their home.
That's when I saw my dad on the floor. It's there. I yell to him and I run over there, yelling for my mom. The whole thing is just, it spins in your head. I lived this over and over and over for over 2 years.
But today on the witness stand, Koula got his chance to explain both.
He went into the house and came back out with his checkbook and a pen. I just didn't have an idea what I wanted to take out of there, if I wanted to take 75 or 50. He tore a check out and handed me a check and he said, sign it after you fill it out.
Koula testified that check was coming from a reserve fund. It was his money. He just asked his dad to keep it on the side for him in the event of a rainy day, but he never mentioned that check to investigators following the homicides of his parents, nor did he ever admit, until today, that he did sign Dennis's name.
It was you signing the check with your father's permission? That was your testimony this morning?
That's correct.
Of course, that's not what you told the police once you finally admitted the check, right?
That's correct.
So you loved your father so much that you lied about him signing the check in order to cover your own actions.
I didn't know how to explain it.
Koula also answered questions today regarding a note reading "Fixed You," which he found in his mailbox 1 week after the killings. That was also 1 day after police spent 45 minutes questioning his son, and Koula said he panicked. He thought his oldest child was now a suspect in the killings and wanted to take attention off of him.
And I don't know why I wrote "Fixed You" on it. I wrote fixed you. Put it in an envelope. Put it in the mailbox.
You told us that you loved your parents, right?
Yes.
Did you love them enough to help the police find their killer?
I was trying to help with anything I could.
You loved your parents so much that you planted false evidence?
No. That is not why I planted false evidence.
You planted false evidence in an effort to divert the very people who were trying to find your parents' killer, and you say it had nothing to do with them?
I thought that they were after my son.
News 19's Pete Zervakis tells you what Koula's friends told the jury today.
Your friendship continued on into the future, is that correct?
Yes, it did.
Did that include up and through May of 2010?
Yes, it still continues today.
Joe Breyer met Eric Koula back in '93. The two got to know one another while working under Koula's dad at a car dealership for roughly 1 year, and later on, Eric moved in down the block from Joe in West Salem. Their wives then hit it off too, and a friendship between the couples was formed.
We became closer and closer friends to the point where we usually spent at least 1 to 2 days a week together.
So the Breyers testified today about the difficulty of talking to Eric after he found his parents dead in their home May 24th.
His voice is very shaky. He was crying. So was I, and it wasn't a very good day.
He was in shock. I mean, it was totally different behavior than I ever see of him. But I mean, he's grieving. I mean, who could be normal, you know, on a night like that?
The defense also called the Breyers to the stand because they saw Eric the weekend before Dennis and Merna were found. The two couples had drinks on Friday, the night the state says the homicides occurred. The Breyers then went to the Koula house for a barbecue Saturday, and Eric and Joe took part in their usual golf game Sunday morning. Joe said Eric was his normal self all weekend, not appearing to be stressed or nervous, and it's clear he doesn't think his friend is capable of the crimes for which he's now on trial.
Denny was his best friend. He had a lot of respect for him, and they did a lot of stuff together. And same thing with Merna. I think Eric learned a great deal of things from his parents, so he had the most amount of respect for them. Seemed like they were always included in on everything that he did.
This week, we heard from two hired experts who testified they thought the Koula killings were the work of a professional hitman.
Eric Koula's defense team continues to push the theory that his parents were killed by a professional hitman. They called two witnesses today, both neighbors of the late Dennis and Merna. Paul Bagstad says he saw a suspicious man staking out the neighborhood just days before the homicides. And Steve Burgess then testified he'd been receiving threatening phone calls for 4 months before the Koulas turned up dead. Although the last call came 1 or 2 days after, the state says they were killed.
Did you receive threats that you'll be reduced to ashes?
Yes.
And did you receive threats that you're toast?
Yes.
Did the person sound intoxicated when they called?
There were times that it sounded intoxicated, yes.
In your experience, are you aware of any cases where a professional killer called up drunk and just made a generalized threat, like you're toast or something like that?
No, sir, I've not heard of that.
Attempting to shoot down the defense's theory, the state then called former FBI agent James Wagner. He testified about the lack of forensic evidence at the crime scene and the way both Dennis and Merna were killed with single shots to the head. The defense had argued both were due to the experience of the assassin, but Wagner says neither is indicative of a professional hit.
I have not come across an example of an organized hit where there was only one shot.
There were always multiple shots fired into the victims?
Always multiple shots into the head, and in most instances they emptied the gun.
In your experience with homicides and professional killers, are they concerned about making a mess?
No. Again, the goal is to kill. If it makes a mess, so be it.
Wagner also hinted the threatening phone calls to Burgess were unrelated to the homicides.
In May of 2010, was your name, the name Burgess, on your mailbox at your residence?
We've got a monument stone in front of our home that our name is on that.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of professional certainty how likely it is for a professional killer to get the wrong house of his intended victim when the victim's name is on a stone monument out in front of the victim's house?
Overruled.
I've never heard of a situation like that. And frankly, the person would be in a lot of trouble if that happened.
The hitman would be
The hitman would be.
The prosecution is expected to conclude calling its rebuttal witnesses tomorrow.
The jury got the case about an hour ago, but before that, jurors got the chance to hear lawyers from both sides. And the jury came back with a couple of questions for the judge. Well, Heather, after about 19 hours of deliberation, Koula was found guilty on all 3 charges.
It was a case that featured 3 weeks of testimony. News 19's Pete Zervakis was there from jury selection through today's verdict, and he recaps today's developments at the courthouse.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Eric Koula, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
One word.
Guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
Read 3 times.
Guilty of uttering a forgery.
And looks of stunned disbelief on the faces of Eric Koula's attorneys. Koula was convicted of all 3 charges against him Wednesday. 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, with the jury deciding beyond a reasonable doubt that Koula was responsible for the murders of his parents. Jurors also found him guilty of uttering a forgery. That charge stemmed from a $50,000 check Eric deposited the day after Dennis and Merna were killed. It was made out to him from his father, but he admitted on the stand that he had signed Dennis's name. Koula's lawyers and family immediately left the courthouse following the verdict, opting not to comment to media. But the prosecution did hold a small news conference in which the district attorney relayed a concise message from Dennis and Merna's family.
I don't know that they're happy. They're still sad that Dennis and Merna aren't here, but they expressed relief that the jury came to the decision that they did and that there's some finality at this point. There's still a lot of family members that are hurt. Eric has been hurt, his family's been hurt. They were thankful for the effort of not just us, but the investigators, and they've been that way throughout the process. The investigation was incredible. It was incredibly thorough. They tracked down many different leads, many different areas, and spent a lot of time, a lot of hours, and then good old-fashioned police work did a lot to get it to this point. It was easier for us to present the case when the investigation was pretty much laid out in front of us, and we just had to present it to the jury.
Grenke also refused to speculate on whether the inconsistencies in Koula's story throughout the investigation tilted the opinions of the jurors in the prosecution's favor. Koula dropped a note in his own mailbox the week his parents were found dead, then told police in this squad car video that it was a threatening letter. He also testified that he was at this Shopko store around the time his mother was killed, but neither he or his vehicle appear on the store's surveillance footage from that day.
We, of course, thought it was a big factor that he lied about being at Shopko, about the note in the mailbox, about who signed the check, and about the check to begin with. And there were other smaller lies. Whether the jury based it on that or something else, you have to ask them. I'm not sure what they based their decision on, but certainly I saw it as significant that he was lying about things early on in the investigation when it wouldn't have mattered to anyone other than somebody who knew when they had died, and that was part of our presentation. And once you start lying, it's hard to trust what else he's saying might be true. So that was part of our logic.
Frankly, I think the jury got it right.
Even with an almost guaranteed life sentence in prison minutes away,
if the jury was going to convict you, they would somehow have to believe that you were capable of killing your parents and then pretending to your family and friends as if nothing had happened.
Eric Koula and his defense lawyers stuck to their story.
I'm going to fight and fight and bring this person or people forward that did this, because I did not.
2 years have been devoted to this case, thousands of man-hours, all in the interest of protecting the rights of an innocent man.
But those words resonated little, if at all, with Judge Scott Horn, who told Koula he was the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity to kill his parents, and Horn said the echoes of those 2 gunshots will now sound within the Koula family for generations.
Your parents were good, decent people. Your father, frankly, was a person you should have become, someone who earned what he had through skill and hard work. They should be enjoying retirement and a quiet life with family and friends. And you took that from them.
My mom, she had the voice of an angel. She would sing the same lullaby she sang to me, to my daughter. And I don't get to hear her voice anymore.
Your sister has been deprived of the loss of her parents. You're responsible for that. Their grandchildren will grow up without Grandma and Grandpa. for an unearned $50,000. You destroyed those lives and those relationships.
The defendant has shown no remorse. The court, I think, saw throughout the trial how ludicrous and ridiculous some of his lies became.
Those lies included a $50,000 check Koula wrote himself from his father's account, as well as a threatening letter, which Koula told police he found in his mailbox 1 week after the murders. This is surveillance video from that day, but Koula admitted during trial that he'd written the note himself.
You took the life of the two people who gave you life. And you'll spend the rest of your life incarcerated.
Still, the defense remains optimistic. Koula's attorneys say now that the sentence has been handed down, they can proceed with their appeal.
We might as well get on with it, which is exactly what we did. We had the sentencing hearing, took care of that, and now we intend to move forward with taking care of business, and that is getting this guy acquitted and getting him home to his family.
But while he waits for any possible progress within the appellate system, Eric Koula will be incarcerated in a Wisconsin state prison with no end in sight.